As we pivot to this next presentation, I was reflecting last night. I was putting my daughter to bed on these last 10 days. And I don't think that hectic or stressful adequately describes how everything went. We all say unprecedented a lot these days too, and that doesn't really describe what happened. The reality is there is no good word to explain how scary, catastrophic, and crippling the last 10 days have been for our community. But I can think of a few words that describe how our community responded to this event, and they include heroic and inspiring. As individuals, we choose to live anywhere, but we can choose to live anywhere, but we do choose to live here. And during this crisis, I was inspired to see neighbors helping and receiving support from other neighbors, people self-organizing to distribute fundamental food and groceries to those who were hit hardest, restaurants offering hot meals, faith communities working together to deliver services, brewers providing much needed clean drinking water, families sharing their limited resources, friends checking in with each other. I personally can't thank all of these groups enough. While our city employees work 24/7 to get our critical infrastructure, our power, our water, our roads, our hospitals, our police, fire, and EMS stations back up and running, so many community members and organizations stepped up to help. After all, this is Austin. We're a resilient city, but more importantly, we are a caring city. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you. Today's staff will provide a high-level overview of how we responded to this event and continue to respond. This event was unlike any other. According to the National Weather Service, the storm broke so many records. It set new records for the lowest temperatures, the highest number of hours below freezing, and record snowfall levels. You've also probably heard that our state's power grid was minutes away from a statewide blackout that could have lasted weeks. This was a statewide disaster. And in most cases, we would have reached out to our neighboring communities to help, but they were suffering and struggling as well. The entire state was and continues to be competing for some of those same resources. You will hear how our own employees, the people who we all rely on to respond to the emergency situation, often couldn't because they didn't have power or water, couldn't communicate their status, and couldn't travel to their work sites. You will also hear how we came out of this storm and how we are recovering. We have a lot to cover today, and I want to be certain that I know that we won't be able to answer every question you have, but I assure you that we will carve out time for more detailed conversations at a later date. You will hear from Juan Ortiz, our Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, Cindy Jackson, our Deputy General Manager for Austin Energy, and then Greg Mazzaros, our Director of Austin Water. And with that, I'll turn it over to Director Ortiz. Juan?
Thank you, Spencer. Mayor and Council, thank you for giving me the opportunity to give you a report on where we are in response to this never-before-seen event. Like I said, my name is Juan Ortiz. I'm the Director for the City of Austin Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. The goal of our office is to prepare the community for disasters and help coordinate the response when disaster strikes. Before we move forward, can I also have the slides for this presentation put up? Okay, next slide. The Austin Travis County Emergency Operations Center is the facility where the city and county departments, regional organizations, volunteer partners, and critical infrastructure organizations, we all come together and coordinate major disasters. For this event, the EOC activated on February the 12th, on that Friday, after previously in that week already conducting cold weather operations as necessary. Next slide. The EOC uses the incident command system to manage personnel and resources. This system is flexible and scalable to respond to the incident. And we're able to work with all the different organizations that you see on the screen to work together. These are just an example of some of the organizations that were involved in response to this incident. Next slide. Like I was saying, the system is flexible and scalable to respond to the incident. On the screen, you see an example of what a typical organization structure looks like in the EOC as we manage to respond to all the different needs of a disaster. One way of describing our response or the role of our office is to work as being the conductor of an orchestra, making sure that all city departments and county departments play their parts and ensure no efforts are duplicated or lost. Next slide. Also wanted to say that the response still continues in some areas, and recovery and will continue for several more weeks. And recovery has been commenced in other areas as we continue to work to address our community's needs and continue to move forward. We had dozens of city and county staff and people from partner agencies work 24 hours, 7 days a week. And as the picture here shows, sometimes having to live in the facility away from the families for days, that we could respond to the storm as was required from us. Austin remained below, the next slide. Like the city manager indicated, we broke a lot of records. Austin remained below freezing for more than 164 consecutive hours, breaking a record by nearly 2 days for the longest freeze event in the area. Austin also experienced the highest 2-day total for snow ever recorded. According to the National Weather Service, this weather event even broke daily records for climate sites in the region. All climate sites saw 5 to 6 consecutive days of record-breaking temperatures, as well as multiple days for record-breaking snowfall. This unforgettable event had catastrophic impact to the entire state of Texas, including South Texas, and failed power grids, burst water pipes, and limited road to air travel. This incident provided a unique set of challenges. As an example, we established a shelter in one location, then lost power and had to be moved, only to lose water at the second location, requiring it to be moved again. All of these 3 relocations happened in less than 12 hours, and all of our city and county and community partners worked together to make sure that these happen as quickly as possible without any disruption to the people that we were trying to provide services for. Many of our staff were also directly impacted by the storm effects, just like the community. Many were people who stand up to help when disasters strike or without power, without the ability to communicate, unable to get to work because unsafe road conditions, lost access to portable water, and experienced property damage to their own homes. Our human resources were severely limited because of this storm. Before I pass the next part of the presentation to Sydney Jackson with Austin Energy, I just also want to say we did suffer a burst pipeline at one of our isolation facilities, and we were able to successfully move everybody, consolidate them into the other isolation facility that we had. And we're working with the facility owners to ensure that they make repairs and we're able to utilize the facilities as best as we possibly can. Next, like I was saying, we're going to pass this presentation to Sydney Jackson with Austin Energy.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, City Manager Kronk. I'd like to express some of the same sentiments in terms of the significance of this event. This electric grid degradation that we had in Texas represents one of the most severe electric grid compromises ever in the history of the United States. This situation rises to that level of significance. Grid reliability is a fundamental tenet that our whole economy depends upon, and this challenge impacted the whole economy, as you're aware. In parallel with this grid emergency, we also had the polar vortex, as you led earlier, Mr. Mayor. That polar vortex was 1 in a 100-year excursion in temperatures, raising load, further making demands upon the electric grid system. And the confluence of both of those at the end of the day, as we know, led to emergency declarations orders from the state and federal in Texas. From an individual Austin Energy customer, we felt that same emergency, you, I, all of us. As City Manager Kronk spoke to, we as Austin Energy, our staff, rose to the occasion, and I'd like to speak to some of the considerations that Austin Energy personnel and staff and team members did. One, to arrest the electric grid degradation, to stabilize this electric grid crisis, and then help in its restoration. So I'm going to speak to 7 different areas. How Austin Energy conformed and met and executed the ERCOT directives to shed load, not only to shed load, but also to restore load. Austin Energy's power supply and its power plants were a strong contributor to stabilizing the situation. I'm going to speak briefly to that. Austin Energy's management of financial risk, our risk management protocols are an essential issue that came to bear. And as you have seen in the news, that is an important consideration. Obviously, the storm field crews get a lot of attention, but our response and our contributions to restore normalcy were beyond that. Critical customers. Oftentimes, people don't consider that we have to, while we're doing this load shed, we have medical, fire, police, and other emergency responders that we have to keep energized, and we were able to do that. In addition to that, dealing with some of the large industrial customers and their processes that are ongoing, and we work to get them offline, and sundry of support and logistics roles as well. So I'm going to step through those. As City Manager said, this is intended just to be a high-level flyover. There will be opportunities for post-event analysis, but I wanted you to have this high-level view. So let's talk about the overarching, the load shed directives. The load shed directives executed by ERCOT, they are their main lever to solidify the grid when you have a deficient power supply and strong load. One way to balance that equation from ERCOT's standpoint, and it's their directive, it's their responsibility, and it's likewise our responsibility to follow their lead because they are the grid operator. We executed several directives to shed load. Not only did Austin Energy execute that, but all similarly situated utilities with transmission and distribution authority did the same in orchestration. It is that singular lever that arrested grid degradation, provided some stability, and allowed time for generating units to return to service and restore normalcy. Load shedding is an unenviable task. It is required. It is the major level to restore grid stability, and absent Austin Energy personnel executing that within the time frames and effectively and efficiently, the unthinkable may have occurred. Let me move to Austin Energy power supply. So all of our generating units were made available to ERCOT. Our Austin Energy power supply team, our power plant operators were sleeping in facilities. They were sequestered in facilities just as well as our operation team. They were made themselves available, oftentimes while their personal situation was in harm's way, as we're all aware. We brought both our Decker, Sand Hill, and Fayette facilities contributed and were made available to ERCOT. Obviously, when you have a power supply shortage, anytime you can bring power supply and make it available, that is a benefit. While we did have some outages, the power supply team was able to restore those facilities in short order and making it available. In conjunction with the power supply, we also had financial risk management. The power supply equation is part of that, but our financial team, our risk management team, has been engaging in the necessary risk management protocols, as you well know, that has mitigated and lessened our exposure to the extreme price volatility that has been experienced in this time in the ERCOT market. While our CFO, I believe, should be on this call, and he'd be able to address that more in the Q&A section. Let me also talk about storm restoration. That is a significant event. This was a multi-day storm full of ice, snow, precipitation, and our storm restoration teams worked tirelessly, sequestered as well in Austin Energy facilities, working in very adverse conditions and very dangerous conditions, but nevertheless working for the benefit of the community. Transitioning to critical customers. While the load shed requirements are being directed by ERCOT and executed by our operations personnel, we also have to maintain critical load. And that critical load is necessary for civil society, and that might be, or that critical load is medical facilities, police, fire, emergency responders, and those circuits and those loads were maintained while we were executing ERCOT directives. Another significant issue that's going on simultaneously in all of this is the working with some of the large industrial customers. As you might imagine, these are huge facilities that consume huge amounts of energy, and as they have processes, ongoing processes, the immediate restoration of those processes can cause compromises not only to their own facilities, safety compromises, they can cause environmental, chemical compromises. We worked with all of these large industrial customers so that they were able to come offline as effectively and smoothly as possible, averting some of the things I just managed. That was a significant accomplishment in this crisis. And then lastly, let me speak to support and some of the logistics teams. As our teams were quarantined across our service territory, able and ready to respond at a moment's notice because they were closed while transportation corridors were compromised. We had a team of logistics personnel that were providing food and other essentials just to sustain them while they were sequestered. In addition to that, I just want to topically mention the customer service piece. As the customer service team tried and executed, working to address questions, tried to relieve fears, and that was a very important logistics support task. Again, post-event analysis is forthcoming. There are some lessons learned in this space, and I'd like to take you through the timeline. Could we put up those slides that I mentioned, that I submitted? I'm sorry, I'm not seeing them. Would someone confirm that they're there?
They should be there now.
This
Okay.
They're out, Mr. Jackson.
Sid,
I still don't see them.
We can see that.
You can see them, okay?
Yes.
I'll just speak to them from memory. The first slide speaks to the confluence of, let's see if I can find, the authority of ERCOT. So why do we load shed? Load shed is the authority of ERCOT. ERCOT has the ability to mandate load sheds. Their authority is given to them by the Public Utility Commission of Texas. As I mentioned before, they are the grid operator. They are the ones with the only unique insight to see the whole grid of Texas. Austin Energy does not have that view, and as their oversight, they direct all the individual constituents, such as Austin Energy. I mentioned the polar vortex. I'm not going to belabor that point, but again, employees working around the clock to support and sustain the grid and to arrest further degradation. Next slide, please. The sequence of events, I'm just going to speak to this topically. What we have in the February 11th, February 12th, February 13th and 14th, those were generally associated with the storm event. The actual execution of ERCOT load shed directives did not come until Monday morning, 2015. So as the storm came through the community, we had severe sleet, and we had outages associated with that. Most of those outages were cleaned up by, as we approached midnight, we were probably 99% restored from those outages from the storm events that happened Thursday, Friday. As we approached Sunday, we experienced more outages as well. But as we approached the load shed event that happened starting Monday, and that's why it's a different color, we went from probably 19,000 outages, customers that were out going into that time frame, and as Monday, as the load shed events, that grew to 220,000 customers out. That load shed event was sustained. It was deep, and again, it represents a severe grid compromise, as I mentioned earlier. As power supply was restored to ERCOT, they started lifting our constraints. Our team started restoring customers. As we approached Thursday, we were on full bore restoration. On Friday, again, a restoration. As we approached Saturday, we were nominally 99% restored. And again, all of these load sheds being conducted, as you can see on the other page, while we're trying to keep, at the next page, please, trying to keep critical load going. Trying to do rotating outages, which we initially started to do on the onset of the load shed events. As you're well aware, and as you've heard many times over in the press, load shed could not be completed due to the severity of the actual curtailments mandated by ERCOT. To execute a load shed would have been to curtail a critical customer to shed another customer. And those critical customers are a preserved block. The cuts were so deep that load shed wasn't possible. Or excuse me, rotating outages wasn't possible. My apologies. The next slide is just some visual indications of the severity of the storm, the severity of the weather, but by far the major severity was the grid compromise. While trees can come down and we can fix local distribution, once the electric grid is compromised, that is overarching as compared to a localized event. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Before we take questions, I'm actually going to turn it over to Director Mazzaros and then back to Juan, and then we will complete our presentation before answering questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to real quickly, Manager, thank Director Jackson, Chief Operating Officer, only been with us now for 2 weeks. Arrived here just days ahead of this event. Thank you for getting here at least a week early.
Thank you.
And we have an incredible team at Austin Energy, and I will just note that our General Manager, Jackie Sargent, is up at the Capitol testifying, and that's why she couldn't be with us today. Great.
Good morning. Nice to be here today. I am Greg Mazzaros, Director of Austin Water, and want to provide you an overview of our experience. Mayor, Council, this is my 37th year in the water industry, and sometimes I reflect that I've seen everything, but this event was like no other. At its peak, TCEQ reported over 1,100 water utilities in the state of Texas in some form of a boil water notice, and just really an incredible experience for our industry. Each utility is a little different, though, and I thought I'd walk you through kind of how this affected Austin Water and how this progressed and what we're focusing now. This all starts with preparation. Our utility was getting prepared for this event ahead of the bad weather. We began to prepare for sequestration of our employees. Much like my Austin Energy colleague indicated, we had dozens of employees who spent up to a week at our dispatch centers and our plants, preparing and getting through this event. We took chemical deliveries at all of our plants. We went into this event with full chemical inventories. We weatherized plants, wrapped thermal blankets, prepared our fleet for operation during freezing temperatures. Clearly that was one of the challenges. In a typical operational day, we will roll 600 vehicles, and with the roadways essentially shut down for much of this event, it was really, really challenging for our employees to move about and help manage the system through the extreme weather. We also took an opportunity on the preparation side to make sure all of our reservoirs were filled, and really got all that prepared before the ice storm began on Friday. Really, the first 5 days of this event, from the ice storm on Friday, Thursday the 11th into Friday, all the way through Tuesday, things were operating pretty well for us. Our biggest concern was actually wastewater. With the rolling blackouts, we were experiencing significant wastewater incidents. We have hundreds of small facilities, lift stations throughout the community, and as the blackouts were hitting those areas, we were losing power to our smaller facilities. And so our focus was transporting portable generators across the city and getting some of these small lift stations working again, cleaning up overflows. Very challenging, but that was the first part of our experience was on the wastewater side. As the event continued to intensify, really on Tuesday night into Wednesday is when we started to see water issues emerge. It was late Tuesday night, I got a call from our operations center and our head of operations where he was describing changes in water use. And I can put it no more clearly than water use was exploding. It was just climbing off the dial for us. Quite honestly, I didn't believe the numbers, and I ordered some of our crews to go and physically check some of the reservoirs, particularly Southwest where this was first starting, and verify that these numbers were correct. And as we all learned, they were correct. And the reason that water use was exploding was our system was exploding. And I mean that literally. The number of breaks and burst pipes and private infrastructure that fell apart during this extended 100-hour freeze is just incredible. And certainly you all have a feel for that, either through your own direct experience or the experience of your constituents. Mayor, I remember talking to you during one of those days, and you were asking me about water main breaks and leaks, and I said I didn't think it would be in the thousands, but it was in the many hundreds. Our crews were heroic and have been heroic repairing water mains and leaks. We experienced more leaks and breaks in a 4-day period than we would typically get in 6 to 8 months. And we've been knocking these out, 40 to 60 every 24 hours. We've been at 24-hour operations on distribution system repairs since this event started. But really that paled in comparison to what happened on the private side. Tens of thousands of private buildings had burst pipes, burst fire lines, significant damage at the apartment complexes. And these are not just small lines. These are sometimes 6 and 8 inch fire service lines by the thousands, the tens of thousands that were breaking and leaking. And really that was a fundamental cause of our system depressurizing. We could just not pump water through the system with that kind of use and leak that was occurring. And whenever pressures drop below minimums, 20 pounds per square inch, that requires a boil water notice. That's protective of public health and safety. Water pressure is what keeps the risk low that other sources of water could get into our system. And whenever we drop below minimums, we issue boil water notices to make sure we're protective of public health and safety. And that's what we did. Wednesday is a series of boil water notices, ultimately culminating with the entire system. As we moved into Wednesday and beyond, our goal was to stabilize the system, to make sure we understood what was going on. We began canvassing the system to make sure there was no transmission main failure, a very large main. We're fortunate we did not have transmission main failure. We began to restore service. working through bringing our reservoir levels back up, progressing through the various pressure zones to restore service, and lifting our boil water notices through a sequence of the pressure zones, starting with our main central zone and working out through the other zones. I want to make it clear that we know this event's not over. And while the public system is stable, we are turning our eyes towards helping on private water system damage. I've redirected our incident commanders. We're still running incident command at Austin Water, and they are working to team with our apartments, working with the EOC to help these folks restore water. We know there are dozens, perhaps hundreds of apartment complexes that sustained significant damage, and there's still many days ahead for them to recover from this. And I'll just share a story along that lines. Last night, working in Council District 3, Council Renteria's district at Fargo Drive, we dispatched crews working with an apartment complex there, some of our experts helping. We brought construction lights out so their plumbers could work through the night, and they had water restored this morning. We have now over 40 Austin Water employees that are delivering water throughout the community to these apartment complexes. We're working on plans where we can use hydrants to fill water for apartment complexes, bulk water, maybe even wire them with water with hydrants. We have reallocated $1 million of funding for low-income customers to repair plumbing at their areas. We're taking steps on the financial side to make sure that customers stay whole, don't experience large bills, and we are providing relief there. We've started those actions, and I know there'll be some more about that on the council side. We're going to stay on this and help these apartment complexes and others get water back to their systems. It's hard work and detailed work, and this is not going to be easy. And we're doing what we can and lending expertise and resources to that effort. Mayor and council, I want you to know too that we're committed to examining this at every level. I know Councilmember Kitchen is asked about communication strategies, and we did a lot during this notice to try to keep customers up to date. We did use texting systems. We used Central Texas Warn. We used some of our new portal capability through our advanced meter infrastructure, MyATX Water, to begin some communications, interactive maps, other operational reports. We still need to get better, but hopefully you saw some innovation here. Our map alone had over 1 million hits as we were lifting the boil water notice, and so I think we made some good progress there. I do want to note the incredible effort by our employees. And if you give me just a few minutes, I want to give you just a couple examples to make that come to life. So some of you, if you were following our Twitter feed, you saw the tweets we had, and our most popular one was with Abram Rocha. Abram repairing a water line in the snow, water up to his knees, and we did that by the hundreds throughout this event. And Abram's now a superstar on social media. He had 67,000 views and followers, and so that just brings a highlight to the kind of effort that went on. Another story I'll share is a new hire, Marilyn Tolliver, working in our operations center. We asked her to call all the hospitals and get updates from them. And when you're calling a hospital that's out of water, that's not a very pleasant experience. And she did it with professionalism and grace, and her work helped us get those hospitals back in service faster than we could without her. And I'll share a story. This came from Councilmember Fuentes. She contacted me during the event and mentioned a Walmart that was experienced water problems at Slaughter and I-35. They had food available for customers that were lined up, and they wanted to open, and we sent distribution crews out there, and they checked the public system. They ultimately got with the store manager, walked her store, and found a leak in their garden center that they were able to help her isolate, and that store started up. Matter of fact, Jessica with Councilmember Fuentes' office sent some pictures of shoppers with food in their cart. And that's the level of service that our employees went to. Mayor, Council, you should be very proud of them. And if you see them on the street or working, please take time to thank them for the service. Over 1,200 Austin Water employees gave that level of service throughout that event. And we're committed to not only, again, recovering a still, but learning from this event. Our after action reviews on infrastructure, communications, better emergency distribution of water. This is going to be a long-term event where we're going to stay focused on this and make our systems more resilient. And that concludes my remarks, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. We actually going to round it out with Director Ortiz. He has a few more slides to go through, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Spencer. Picking up the slides back up. Next slide. Just want to talk a little bit about the cold weather shelters that we operated. The city has a normal process of how we open up cold weather shelters to provide a place for those folks that are experiencing extreme colds or may have a place to spend the night. And so we open up these cold weather shelters once we meet specific criteria. These shelters are normally just operated overnight, and the next morning, folks go as the facility closes for the day. We quickly had to make changes to that approach, and we were able to operate those shelters for 24-hour operations while we were experiencing the freezing temperatures that did not go up above freezing for multiple days. So in addition to that, because of COVID, we have to make sure that we're maintaining social distancing. So that required us to limit the capacity of the facilities, and we were having to open up multiple facilities to make sure that everybody had a place to go. We ended up having to operate these facilities 24 hours a day, starting on the 13th of February, and then also we were able to take care of over 1,000 people in shelters that were operated in different locations across the city and the county, as well as supported by the city and county to include Austin Disaster Relief Network. Next slide. These shelters, we're providing a place for those folks that had no power or had no heat at home. And we were encouraging them to go to these facilities so they can stay warm or spend the night, as well as find food and water at these locations. The Palmer Event Center specifically served as the primary cold weather shelter. As we were dealing with the ability to move people around, the Palmer Event Center became the place where, when you got there, most likely you were staying there until road conditions allowed us to kind of move people around to other facilities and kind of spread the lower cost of different shelters that we had. But the Palmer Event Center got to at one point full capacity, and we had close to 500 people in this facility that we were providing shelter as well as food and water throughout that event. In addition to opening the Palmer, other shelters and locations were open at AISD school facilities and also faith-based locations in coordination with the Austin Disaster Relief Network. Next slide. Next slide. In the water distribution area, I just want to point out that we started very quickly early on to identify sources of water. We reached out and bought all available locally sourced water sources, as well as we placed an emergency order for a million gallons of water that we're using to support the water needs throughout the community. We developed a three-phase approach to look at what are the critical areas that we had in operations to ensure that there was plenty of water. critical infrastructure locations, as well as COVID facilities that we were operating and the shelters. The second phase was more targeted at the vulnerable populations, and that's a phase that we continue to work with right now, is to provide water to those locations where we have vulnerable populations and be able to make sure that we have access to drinking water at their locations. The third phase, that was where we established the different points of distribution, and that was created once we were able to receive plenty of water on hand to establish the different points of distribution. At one point, we had more than 10 facilities, 10 locations that were functioning as points of distribution across the city. And today we have distributed over 3 million bottles of water through these points of distributions and other efforts that we have. And the work's not done. We still continue to provide water wherever we see the need. And we're continuing to work to identify those locations and make sure that we have folks that can have clean drinking water for them to drink and use. And like Greg explained, we're working to explore other areas of what other things we can do to make bulk water available for folks to use in their homes. And we'll be working with the water department to support those efforts as we make water available for the coming days and weeks. Next slide. As we identify the different specific areas that need water, like apartment complexes, we're asking them to call 311, where our teams, consisting of Awesome Code and other community groups, will identify those locations. Our staff will reach out to them and verify the need, and we'll be working with them to establish points of distribution in their facilities and provide water as necessary, and work on a timeline to see how best they can make those repairs and make sure that those repairs are made in those facilities as quickly as possible. For single-family dwellings, we're asking those individual families that if you need water to call the Austin Disaster Relief number, and that way we can identify them and be able to provide water more specifically to those locations. So we're looking to identify those multifamily locations as well as the single-family locations. Next slide. In the healthcare arena, we were supporting everything from all the area hospitals, and then making sure that we're working with them to see what we can do to keep them open, as they were dealing with loss of power, generator failures, limited access to fuel, as well as make sure that they had water to operate the chillers and make sure they're able to provide heat in those facilities. And at any moment, we could have been real close to where we might have had to evacuate a facility, and so therefore we had a different group of folks who were working at contingency of what we needed to do to be able to, if we needed to evacuate a facility, where would we take them? And therefore we opened up a functional needs shelter at the Austin Convention Center. After that, after trying to open up that facility and another facility that also experienced loss of water and had to be relocated to the Austin Convention Center. So the Austin Convention Center at one point was serving as the location for an alternate care site in support of the COVID operations, and also a functional needs facility to provide a place for those folks that could not stay in a hospital, or patients that were being discharged from the hospital but had no power at home and no water and needed a place to stay while before they're able to get back home. This allowed us to make sure that we kind of offload some of the capacity hospitals, to allow the hospitals to be able to take more patients that needed their attention. Next slide. Like it's been said, we continue to provide services to all our citizens. Folks can go to the city website to find information about water distribution, food distribution, information on where the temporary showers and laundry centers have been established, as well as water and power outage information and any emergency repairs. There's a couple of things I wanted to point out here, and that is we have been declared a presidential disaster, and folks can call FEMA to get that additional information, as well as there's ways that folks can sign up to receive assistance from other nonprofit organizations active in disaster. And that is through a program called Crisis Cleanup. And I'd like to give out a couple of phone numbers for folks to call. Obviously, the city operates the 311, so if anybody needs assistance, a good source of information would be to call 311. As well as you can also call the Austin Disaster Relief Hotline at 512-806-0800. Crisis Cleanup for help with damaged homes can be reached at 1-844-965-1386. And finally, contact the FEMA Disaster Assistance number at 800-621-3364. Folks also need to, folks can also go to the City of Austin website and austintexas.gov/weather info. And I'm going to repeat this in Spanish as well for the Spanish speaking people that are listening to this call. Si usted necesita asistencia, puede llamar a la ciudad al número 311. También puede hablar para recibir asistencia hablando a Austin Disaster Relief Network al número 512-806-0800. También tenemos un programa que estamos participando para poder darle asistencia para hacer, si usted necesita ayuda debido al daño ocasionados por el choque de invierno, puede llamar al 1-844-965-1386. Y también no se le olvide hablarle a la Agencia Federal de Manejo de Emergencia, FEMA, para asistencia al número de 1-800-621-3362. Y no olvide de visitar la website de la ciudad de Austin, a austintexas.gov/info climática. The last thing I would like to say is we had next slide. We had over 200 volunteers help the city and the county provide services to the community throughout the week. Thousands of hours of time donated by the community to help others who were in need. We are also deeply appreciative of the hundreds of community organizations and businesses that chipped in to make a difference in areas. This is not only heartening, but an important piece of the response that help our community. This winter is still ongoing, and in the coming weeks, we will sit down and take a look at lessons learned and that worked well. In all my years as public service, I've never seen or lived through an event quite like this. It was even humbling feeling to see so many of the community leaders come together so quickly to help one another. On behalf of hundreds of thousands of people who helped us survive and begin recovering from this event, I want to personally extend my heartfelt thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Director Ortiz and Sydney and Greg. Again, today was really meant to provide a high-level overview as we continue to respond to this weather event. There are so many incredible stories out there in our community, and then from our individual city employees, any of which you've heard from today, but I'll echo what has been said, which is we will do a comprehensive overview and response to this, an after action report, and make sure that we have many opportunities to discuss with you, Mayor and Council, and our community about what we learned from this and how we can improve and get better. That is not the goal for today. Today, we really want to take immediate action for your consideration on additional ways that we can address this with our community. Those items are before you, and we hope to get to them shortly. I did want to personally acknowledge Director Ortiz. You have done incredible work over the last handful of days in particular, but just the leadership and calm demeanor that you've had throughout this situation. You're often sleeping on the floor at our Emergency Operations Center. And I will also note as a personal story that you, on the first day of the snowfall, made sure that we were doing everything we could to make sure that our community is safe, including bringing together a crew, including our EMS folks, to go out to all the different encampments of people experiencing homelessness, as many as we could do in that day, over 50, where you personally joined the EMS folks and knocked on tents to make sure that they knew that they had opportunity to shelter, that we had those shelters available and their transportation was ready for them. So you can hear stories about this all the time, but I did want to personally acknowledge Director Ortiz's leadership in this effort. Thank you so much. With that, Mayor Council, I'll turn it over to you. We have other staff available for questions, but we did want to take a moment to make sure that you had a chance to have any questions answered at this time. Mayor? You're on mute, Mayor.
Thank you. Juan, would you also please thank Eric Carter, who's kind of like your twin. Best as I can tell, you guys are joined at the hip. That's the county equivalent of Juan and the county side of the infrastructure that we're not seeing here today. But obviously, everybody was working together. I want to thank Judge Brown for being actively involved in the operation as well. Colleagues, it's after 12. Everybody needs to be short. Let's kind of do this as rapid fire as we can. We will break for lunch when we're done with these questioning. We'll come back at 1:30. That's a hard time for speakers to speak. I think there are, I don't know the exact number, somewhere between 6 and 12, I think. So not a tremendous number of speakers. They're going to speak for 3 minutes each. Then we'll go through the agenda. We're not going to pull anything. We're going to consider each of them in turn. I'm going to start first giving an opportunity to those council members that did not ask a question in the first group. We'll start with there and then work our way backwards from the people that spoke before.
And Mayor, right before you get started, just a quick process question.
Yes.
So just for us to give general comments, thanking staff and the like, would that be a good moment for us when we get back from the lunch break right before the speakers?
I think the best time to give those general comments will be when we come back. Let's come back at 1:30. They'll hear from the speakers, and then there'll be a chance for people to give general comments before we get into the agenda items.
Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. So let me start with questions right now on this part of the disaster response stuff. I'm going to give Council, someone who didn't ask questions this morning, first shot at asking questions now. Councilmember Poole.
Thanks. Two things. One, my deep appreciation for the heroism of everybody from start to finish who were involved in the winter weather crisis, the 10 and 11 day persistent situation that we just came through. Calamities, compounding calamities. It was difficult for everybody. I'm going to hold my questions for a week. Councilmember Kitchen and I chair the individual utility oversight committees. I oversee Austin Energy, as you all know, and chair that oversight committee, and Councilmember Kitchen chairs the Austin Water Oversight Committee, and she and I have been working on a combined, probably just a 2-hour meeting that would expand on some of the information that was provided to us today. I want to dig in a little bit more on how things rolled out and talk a little bit about utility market economics, because I think it's really important for us all to understand how ERCOT and the PUC and Railroad Commission work here in the state and what role Austin Energy plays both as a generator and a purchaser of energy off of ERCOT. So please look at your calendars for March 3rd, 1 o'clock. We'll divide it up into 2 1-hour segments. We'll do Austin Energy and we'll do Austin Water. And then those of us who are on the Water Oversight Committee, I think Councilmember Kitchen, weren't you planning to also take up, because that's a regularly scheduled meeting for Austin Water Oversight. oversight, you had some other items on that agenda that we'll still take up.
We have actually decided to devote the time to our disaster response, and as Director Masaros mentioned, we've been working with him to work through exactly the items we're covering.
So we'll have an opportunity next week to dig a little deeper into these efforts. But just one last time, City Manager, thank you. Your leadership throughout has been stellar. There is nobody who didn't put themselves on the line for getting the City of Austin through this disaster, bringing all the various and sundry groups together in partnership and collaboration. It takes a little bit of time for everybody to kind of gen up and pull together, but wow, the effort was astronomical and it was immensely impressive. And so I thank you for the very strong leadership that you showed to the City of Austin as our city manager. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Councilmember Report, look forward to those joint meetings next week. I would imagine this is going to be something that we have conversations in lots of different forums, but having those two council meetings together, I look forward to participating in your all's meeting. Councilmember Renteria or Cassar? Councilmember Cassar? Go ahead.
So real quick, Director Mazeros, because we'll be talking about this in the items coming up, can you expand a little bit about what the city staff are going to be doing that you've assigned to emergency water delivery to those places without water? And do we have any estimate yet on about how many major complexes are down?
A few thoughts there. In terms of estimates, we've been working through various data sources, and there's a lot of folks gathering data, including a lot of outside groups on who's out of water, and it changes dynamically. I spoke to one of our staff that's been leaning into this, and she communicated that she had a list of 400, and that there was probably 100 duplicates in there, and she's cleaning that up. But I would anticipate right now there's at least 200 to 400 apartment complexes, condos, areas served by kind of interior piping systems on their side that are out of water in one form or another. That's changing rapidly, but that's a very large number, and that doesn't count single family homes or others that are struggling through those kind of things. What we're doing is working with the EOC. We're targeting water drop-offs at those locations, right to those facilities, and trying to get water to those areas, even up to the doorstep. Some of those areas are with elderly folks, and they don't want to come out of their apartment, concerned about COVID or other concerns, and we're trying to work through some very specifics there. We're rendering expertise there in terms of how we can assist and give advice on bringing them back up to water. As I mentioned, even as simple as providing construction lighting where we can, looking, to team with the EOC and others on how fire hydrants in the area can help with bulk filling, and people can keep toilets flushing and things of that sort. I hope that's giving you a little bit of a flavor of kind of what we're doing there. Councilmember, you had another question. I don't recall it.
No, I think that is right. But yeah, and we'll talk later about whether we can get big water tank delivery in some of those parking lots, or for elderly folks if they can put a big jug outside their door that we fill, or those sorts of things. And as a look back at some point, I just want to flag, not just for Austin Water, but for everyone, just sort of our communication systems, like who gets texts and who doesn't get texts or emails, as well as sort of what we had so many volunteers step up on homelessness, but what our city response is versus what the community had to pick up and why we couldn't fill in there. Those are questions maybe for the future, but I just want to say them out loud now so folks can start thinking through that as when we do a look back. But my sense is we are still not looking back at the disaster because we're still in it if we have hundreds of complexes without water, and that's not counting all of the single family homes.
And I think that discussion would be appropriate this afternoon in terms of talking about how we're doing the recovery now, not looking back, but from this point forward, how much are we sourcing or organizing through the city, and how much are we relying on partners? Because this recovery is going to be extended here. So I hope that you'll bring that back up at that time. Councilmember Torilla.
Yes, Mayor. What I want to learn later on is the performance of our utility. You know, I believe there was a lot of misinformation out there at the beginning, putting a thing on renewable energy, and which is to be false. But I'm really interested in to see how much we contribute to the state, and how did we help the state out, including the usage of our renewable energy. So I'm very interested to find out, you know, because the governor went on Fox and said that it was our wind power and frozen wind blades and all that other, which I knew it was false when he would mention that, and then later on he took it back. But I still want to find out exactly, you know, what we need to do in the future on our renewable energy. And thank you, especially all your city staff. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Provo, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll save my thank yous for later. But I do want to just drill into, but let me just say a general huge thank you. I want to just drill into a couple things that were said about the process moving forward for water distribution to larger complexes. And I think these questions are directed at Director Masaros. So we have had just an amazing partnership with the Austin Firefighters Association, who has gone to complexes and done water distribution, along with lots of community volunteers using everything from Home Depot buckets to equipment borrowed from breweries and now kind of large vats. And so as I understood your presentation, and I think this is terrific, that now Austin Water and potentially some other city resources are going to be brought to bear for those complexes. So I think what I need to better understand is how many of us have lists. My lists include some properties in y'all's districts, as well as, you know, a good list going of West Campus properties in my own district. And I want to be sure I understand what we should advise those complexes. Should they be calling, as I understood your presentation, they should call 311 to try to work with the water utility in getting that assistance about advice for the repairs, as well as about potential water?
Yes, if I can answer this question. And so obviously, and Greg kind of mentioned as well, that everybody has different kinds of lists. So we're trying to get all the different lists and make sure that we kind of go through them and verify with those facility owners or managers to ensure that they still have a need and what that need is. If there is a apartment manager that is dealing with plumbing issues and doesn't have water running in the facilities, yes, we're asking them to call 311. The team will look at that and see if they're already on the list or not, and we'll reach out to them and make contact and do that verification. And if we need to take water out there, we'll take water. If they just need lighting so they can get their plumbing done, or technical assistance, or whatever that assistance may be, we'll look at seeing how best we can provide assistance in helping them get back online from a water perspective, or be able to get them drinking water for their residents, and then put them on somewhat of a schedule, because we may have to come back and give them more additional water until they're able to make those repairs. But we'll be working with them to try to figure out exactly what the need is. But the first step is to make sure that they call 311. If any of the council members have a specific list of apartment complexes, if we can reach out to them after this presentation, we'll reach out to you and get the list from you, and then we will just run it through the list that we have and make sure that we haven't left anybody off the list. And then we will go through that process.
Thank you, Director Ortiz. Just to clarify, so someone on your staff will reach out to each of the council offices for that? Either that, or if somebody on the manager's staff could let us know who the direct contact is. I've been working to try to update some of the lists I have because, as you said, the situation is dynamic. So again, I just need to know either if y'all are reaching out to us or if there is one contact that you'd like to share with our council offices where we can push that information to. Either is fine as long as it's clear what the process is. And then is this water delivery work being coordinated with the really extraordinary volunteer effort as well? Just so we're not all, I know many offices, including mine, have been working kind of around the clock with the Firefighters Association. I want to be sure we're not sending, that work is coordinated so that we're not sending both volunteers and city to the same complexes. So are you coordinating with that AFA volunteer effort?
Yes, and we will be emailing you instructions on how the list is collected and provided to the EOC. So you'll see that email coming from us shortly.
Great.
The second step to the second part to that question would be we're going to verify that there's a need at the location, and we will work with the other organizations that we're working with to ensure that if we take water to an apartment complex, does the apartment complex have the ability to distribute the water across their complex, or do they need help in getting the water out to everybody else? So it may be a combination. We will bring the water, and if they need help in getting the water distributed, we will also work with the volunteer agencies to get volunteers and accomplish that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Again, we're working our way backwards through the list. Councilmember Alter, do you have anything?
Yeah, I have a ton of questions, and I want to be mindful that I'm not even sure if we're stabilized yet and we're moving into recovery. But I think it's really important that this council sends a very clear message to the community that we are intent on investigating what happened, understanding what went wrong, what went right, and how we can move forward. I want to be really clear on Austin Energy that this is not just about ERCOT. We, in some sense, experienced 2 emergencies connected by the weather. From February 11th to 14th, we had a considerable number of households without power due to a combination of weather and tree damage. At what point during that period from February 11th to 14th, 40% of my district was out of power. This was before there was any issue with ERCOT. And I had households that were out of power from 3 p.m. on February 11th till Sunday morning on the 14th, and then out again on Monday. So we need to, be very clear that we are going to acknowledge all the parts of this event, and that we need to address that first part that was not ERCOT induced. And really understand the lessons that we can learn and what we need to do. There is an enormous amount from the communications problems that we saw the subsequent week that we had already surfaced by the 12th with outage map with respect to the text, with respect to the communications. And I know that AE staff is very aware of this, but I think it's important to the community that they understand that we know these problems happened and that we are addressing them, while at the same time we need to recognize that our staff have been at this 24/7 for a really long time under difficult circumstances and cannot yet pause to do the full analysis that we would like. In that vein, I want to make sure that we are understanding about the vegetation management. My colleagues may recall on the Wednesday before this all started on the 10th that I was emphasizing the importance of that vegetation management in terms of strategy. And so I'm going to really want to understand how much of the non-ERCOT outages could have been avoided if Austin Energy's vegetation plan had been fully implemented, and some questions on that. I also think that we need to get some information to people quickly about how the AE's generation fleet performed. relative to the rest of the state. Some of that was alluded to, and it sounded like it was pretty good news, but that is the piece that's going to allow us to understand any financial implications later on with the PSA. And then since it doesn't sound like we're going to have a whole lot of other times, I want to surface also is that we really need answers to what happened at the Old Ridge Power Plant and why the redundancies we had in place did not work. And then finally, I don't think anyone is intending that we would only have 2 hours of a discussion of this next week. And I know we're all getting our feet under us, but I want to just make it really clear that we're going to have to devote considerable time and resources to the oversight moving forward as we stabilize and as we address the many needs that are still out there in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. All good points, and I think that there's been a posting by Councilmember Tovo that provides greater detail on that item number 6. So I think we also have another vehicle to start setting that in motion. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Harper Madison, did you have something?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I think a lot of these questions, my hope is that we just have considerably more opportunities to ask all our questions. This just feels insufficient. And that's not, I'm not discrediting anybody's contribution to the dialogue. There's just so much that we all individually, our communities, all the stories we're hearing from our constituents, this just doesn't feel like enough. There's so much that we've been downloading over the last several days that I have so many questions. I don't even know where to start, to be honest with you. So I'm going to try to articulate it quickly. One of the things that I have a question about and really want to see something substantive in the way of our body having a dialogue on is how we get that community level effort, that community level mutual aid, and then some sort of facilitation through the city. How do we make that less clunky? I mean, to talk about how it was not nimble would be an understatement. And I don't have to tell Juan that he was, right in the heart of it, which, by the way, I mean, Juan, you probably took more phone calls from me this week. And I mean, thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate your staff. But just thinking moving forward, if we can, have a process that would just be so much less problematic. I think one of my colleagues is actually working on an IFC that'll help to address that. And I really look forward to being able to support that. That was one of the things I wanted to say. But then 3 of my quick questions. We answered the question about non-potable water. I think we're going to do some follow-ups to talk about AFA and their effort with water. We talked about private complexes, HACA complexes. Okay, so one of the other questions about that sort of community level effort, I want to make sure to introduce to the conversation, and we have an opportunity to figure out how to tap into these resources moving forward. I watched Nextdoor, really become a place where people went to for information, and the local Buy Nothing groups. I just want to make sure, and I recognize that we as a city can't fortify those efforts necessarily, but we can certainly be a part of the conversation about how effective they were in the time of need. I also wanted to ask a question about Austin Resource Recovery. I realize they are not a part of the folks who have presented here now, but hopefully during the course of our day, we get a chance to talk about ARR. One, I think this would be for your office. So folks are asking us a lot of questions about recovery from an infrastructural perspective. We all talked about, their pipes failing. So folks are asking a lot of questions about how to tap into any resources we have available to us for home repair, specifically as it pertains to responding to their pipes failing. Is that a HESM question? Who is that? And how do we continue that conversation and make sure to put information out that people can use?
Councilmember, yes, thank you. That's a really good question. We're working, we have a website established called ATX Repair. ATXrepair. And we're also, you can find that at the austintexas.gov website /info. that information will be located in that location. In addition to that, you can also call the crisis cleanup number that I gave earlier before. And in that, you can identify what kind of assistance you need, and whether it's from assistance that is provided from the city or the county, or provided by a nonprofit organizations. That would be probably the best way to start in that recovery effort, right?
Director Ortiz, you have to forgive me, and I think this actually might be a CTM question. I wonder if all of these email addresses and websites and phone numbers that we're all rattling off, I wonder if there's a way for us to be sharing those throughout the course of the meeting. Is that a possibility? Because I know I personally missed half of what you said, and those are probably really important resources. So I wonder if there's a way for us to be sharing those things.
I'll just note, Council or Mayor Pro Tem, that the best source of updated information is on the city's website. And so just going to austintexas.gov, on that front page, there is a link to our cold weather response. And then through that, there is information on everything that has been described. And we continue to update that as we get additional information, additional new programs. And so that is where we have been directing people, is just to our regular website, austintexas.gov. And then on that homepage, it is Severe Weather Recovery Resources is the landing page for everything that we have at the city.
Thank you, City Manager. I appreciate it. And then I think the last question that I have would be about, and this is certainly not something I think we're going to answer today, but if we could have a conversation about moving forward. It felt very much like we were trying to figure out where our best places were, like we didn't have the opportunity to have had, you know, an asset conversation. So the places that we were propping up, I hope moving forward that we have a thorough and comprehensive list of these are the best places, this is why they are effective and or not. Some of the places that we tried to prop up weren't frankly prepared or appropriate for what it is that we were trying to process through them. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation also. Thank you all.
Thank you. Councilor Kitchen.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank Director Masaros for the information that you shared. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the efforts that you all have made and the improvements you made in communication throughout the course of this, as well as the efforts that you're now shifting to help our apartment complexes, particularly those for seniors and low-income folks in the community. Helping them get their water back up and running is so important and really helpful to the to the private community. So I appreciate that. I want to say also to my colleagues, well, let me just emphasize again what you said, Director Masaros, that your incident command is now shifting to working with apartments to restore water. You all are working on delivering water to apartments, and you've shifted $1 million to help individuals with their repair efforts. So I really appreciate that. I want to ask my colleagues if you all, as I work with my colleagues on the Water Committee and my Vice Chair, Councilmember Fuentes, to put together our agenda for next week as we work with Director Masaros. If you have particular issues that you would like to make sure we delve into, please post them on the message board. We will also be posting on the message board issues, should have that the next day or so, but also please bring that to our attention so that we can be sure and incorporate it into our discussions next week. We understand that we cannot cover everything next week, but we want to highlight the kinds of issues and next steps that will be important to work with our with Austin Water on. And so I would invite y'all, it will help us with our discussion next week if you will share the kinds of things that you'd like to see discussed and the kinds of issues you'd like to see us delve into. So I would invite you all to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ellis, and then Kelly, and then Fuentes.
Thank you, Mayor. these are all very good questions and comments that are being asked. And I cannot stress enough that we are not through this yet. I have a lot of apartment complexes that went offline on Tuesday and still don't know how to get clean drinking water and even non-potable water. So I really hope that our planning moving forward addresses those needs in addition to porta potties and hand washing stations. These places have been trying very, very hard to work through their plumbing issues. I'm well aware that once things are no longer on the city plumbing line, that the private managers and owners of complexes are trying to systematically work through their issues. I have seen apartment complexes that own multiple locations in the city try to take all their extra water once they get a building fixed and move it to Southwest Austin, knowing the need is still very great here. So I've seen with some of the text banking that my district is still the most affected by these outages. And so I just really want to put on your radar that we're not through this yet. I know so many employees are working incredibly hard around the clock, as have I and my team and the management offices, that we're all still navigating this. But I do, before our lunch break, want to just daylight that I have added an amendment to the message board. Sorry, I have a four-legged friend joining me here. That I would like more detailed communication with the water utility. I know there was information coming out, but a lot of what I was hearing from my constituents was just that they didn't know what that meant. They didn't know what they were watching for to know when the water would come online. So, I appreciated the graphics being shared. It was good to be able to communicate. We're halfway there. We're 90% there. But knowing that my district was in that last 10% was incredibly stressful for a lot of constituents. So when I see water and utility workers out there fixing things, I tell them thank you, because I know they're working incredibly hard. I know all the offices are working hard, but we are not out of this yet. We still have the next phase of this crisis management. So thank you for your continued diligence on this.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly, did you have anything?
I did, more of a statement also. I just wanted to provide thanks to the city staff and also to North Austin Municipal Utility District number 1, as well as the Williamson County Emergency Services District number 1, the Jollyville Fire Department, for setting up a water fill station, and also for providing water to the constituents in District 6 and all across Austin. I know that Representative John Busey also came to me with a need for water to be taken to the Claremont, which is a retirement community in the city of Austin. It's not covered by the Jollyville Fire Department, yet I was able to get them to go over there and provide water with a fire engine to that retirement community so that those individuals had water when they needed it. And I thought it was a great bipartisan effort, the community just coming together like that. I did want to add something that Mayor Pro Tem reminded me of, and I think it's important for the community to know you should not be bathing with your drinkable water. That is because it is made for drinking, and it's just a super important thing to remember. So thank you so much for that. And again, once all this is all over, I look forward to finding out the answers that everyone in the community has been asking. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Fuentes, do you have anything else?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. It is 1:45. We've gone through. My suggestion would be that we leave, come back at 1:30. That's in 45 minutes, so we can have speakers, and then we'll go through the agenda. Everyone, Manager, Director Masoris, Juan, and CO Jackson, thank you so much for the presentation. We got as a city, got so much done. We relied so much on the volunteers and the individuals that stepped forward. There's a lot we're going to have to learn from this, and a lot of conversations in the future. I also support keeping the focus right now on the people that are still without food, still without water. And one of the things we need to talk about this afternoon is what is the extent of the recovery. We have people that are still needing shelter because their homes are not habitable. So there's an ongoing element of this that we are in the very middle of. And that's where this conversation really needs to focus this afternoon as well. So with that, colleagues, if it's okay, we'll go into recess here at 12:47. We'll come back at 1:30 so that we can listen to the speakers. We'll then go through the agenda items one at a time, and that will be our afternoon. Manager, we'll try to get the disaster staff back out onto the streets just as quickly as we can. We'll work through this afternoon as quickly as we can. All right, see you guys at 1:30. All right, let's hear from the speakers.
The first speaker is Miguel Barbosa.
We are not through this disaster. We are still in it. I am not sure how many people are viewing or listening. People are probably out at work to recover a week's worth of lost work. But I can say that I, Miguel Barbosa, am speaking for many local Austinites when I say what I am about to say. And there's a critical question. When was the city notified about this incoming disaster? If anyone can answer this, please do. Now, I would genuinely like to thank the concerted efforts and force exhibited by Council Districts 1, 2, 3, and 4. They exhibited resiliences and initiative in what still is a state of humanitarian disaster in the city of Austin, Texas. The local civilians who stepped up from all over Austin, thank you too. Lastly, I would like to thank all of the organizations, restaurants, local breweries, plumbers, emergency first responders, and HB partners for also stepping up in this emergency. You are all doing a lot of great work. And if you are still out here, I know how it can feel, for I have been out doing what I can since Saturday. I sincerely hope the city does not forget about these efforts and how the city came together. This should go down in Austin, Texas history. Now, in reference to item 3 and item 6, I approve, and I am sure there is no opposition to them. I just think that concerns are not imminent, for they are here and have been here since February 15th, 2021. Yes, I am talking about water scarcity, continuous food shortage, broken pipes in residential homes and apartment complexes all over town. Just a day ago, or a few days ago, water across town was clean and ready to be drunk. But in many instances, families, including children, are living in unsanitary conditions with water shut off. Why? Well, because their homes have broken pipes. Water is cut off, and who knows when it will be turned back on. It won't be cut back on until those pipes are fixed. People need toilets. Families need showers. This is risky, and quite frankly, it is life-threatening. There needs to be more work done in this state of disaster to make things right. This means bringing in plumbing professionals from wherever they are willing to come from. Get them from the states. No, get them from out of state. The city of Austin really needs them. Some families are now having to start all over again. Floors are wet and moldy, including all of their belongings. People are having to leave their homes, leave the city, and even leave the state of Texas to live with family elsewhere, if that is even a possibility. Till this day, I am providing clean drinking water to some families. I'm going later tonight to visit some families and give them some water. Austin City Council, you will have to stand up and continue doing just that until things are made right. This is what you're elected to do. We also have to look into what landlords are doing to help their tenants, and they should be held accountable if they're not supporting their tenants at all. Bless you, and thank you very much.
Next speaker is Wesley Stewart.
Hi, my name is Wesley Stewart, and I am currently sitting in my truck in the mist, covered in water. I am on day 6 of me and my fellow Austin citizens delivering water to anybody who needs it, which is a lot of people. And I'm speaking right now on Agenda 3, which was the first option and seemed like a fine fit when I read it, but I could have spoken on any item and made the same point just the same. The consideration of declaring a local state of disaster is actually a perfect fit for what I want to say, though. The city, the county, and the state have failed every single Texan. What we have gone through is not only traumatic, but embarrassing. It didn't need to happen, and we all know that. It happened for profit, for greed, It happened because of representative subservience to moneyed interest. We all know that too. We also know that this is going to happen again and again and again faster. And the only clear lesson that anyone I've talked to has gotten from this is that we have no functional government, not at the city, county, or state level. The only true functional government we have right now when shit hits the fan is us. And science and experience has only shown that shit is hitting the fan at a faster rate, just as our experience has shown us continually how inept our quote-unquote leadership is at meeting any real, actual problem. Besides, of course, the problem of moving money from us, the people, to them, the what? The utilities? The representatives? ERCOT? Friends of Greg Abbott? It's hard to tell, really, what we're investing in when it clearly has nothing to do with the reliable transmission of services absolutely necessary to meeting the most basic requirements for human dignity. So, in regard to item 3 and the disaster declaration, I 100% support the declaration. This is the kind of disaster that changes a community forever. And in the case of Austin and in Texas writ large, I think for the better. It's certainly why I'm here and why I will continue to be present and heard from going forward. I'm speaking today that you asked to consider, in addition to declaring a local disaster, to petition Governor Abbott to invoke Section 418.022 of the Texas Government Code and provide aid to individuals who are bearing the financial, emotional, and physical brunt of this travesty of mismanagement, be it those that continue to be directly affected by resource insecurity, numerous water heaters that burst only because of inadequate information, or the abusive wear that I've been putting on my truck every day, lugging almost twice its rated payload just to provide clean water to people who need it. All this because the city, the county, and the state were either unwilling or unable to help, and the companies that we pay to provide these resources
Speaker,
did not,
your time has
because we are
expired.
clearly not who they work for. Can I finish, please?
No, you have 2 minutes, but we appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
Kaiba White.
Hello, my name is Kaiba White, and I'm calling in today on behalf of Public Citizen. We are a nonprofit organization that advocates for consumers and for environmental efforts. And I first of all want to call attention to the fact that the disaster that we are still trying to recover from as a community and as a state is almost certainly a climate disaster. There is still some additional research needed to confirm that these polar vortex events are in fact a result of climate change, but the data is pointing in that direction. And so I think we should expect that this will happen again. I hope that this is something that we can learn from and prepare for so that when it does happen again, it doesn't have the same kind of catastrophic impact on us here locally and across the state as it has this time. First, I'd like to talk about how blackouts can be allocated in a more fair and rational way when electricity supply cannot meet demand, because that, while is something we want to avoid, is very likely to happen at some point again. So we should be prepared for that situation. As you may or may not know, Austin Energy has invested in smart meters. They can turn everybody's individual meter on and off remotely if you don't pay your bill or if you are moving or for whatever other reason it's needed for safety. That can be done. Currently, they do not have the software to do that in bulk batches, but that is something that could be implemented so that instead of whole neighborhoods like my own being with power throughout the entire week and having the benefit of having our heaters on while other people froze for days on end, and that was only because I happen to live near a fire station, and if they have to keep the fire station powered up, then they have to keep me and my neighbors also turned on because we are on the same circuit. We can do better because we have smart meters, so it's worth that investment to make it so that we can utilize what we have already invested in, that hardware. Let's get the software to make it so that we can keep those critical loads on, so that the blackouts could then actually roll and everybody could get some power to keep their homes at least to a minimum temperature that is, survivable, and hopefully could avoid some of the property damage as well that many are experiencing. The other thing I want to talk about is investing in resilience more broadly. There, of course, were many businesses as well as homes that were without power, including grocery stores. And while I agree that in general, commercial entities should not be prioritized in terms of keeping electricity on, food and water, which many people were trying to get from grocery stores, is a basic need. So I would suggest that as we use those smart meters to more precisely target what needs to stay on, we can invest in solar and batteries to also keep things like grocery stores and food.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Selena Sai.
Thank you, Council, for taking this opportunity to review what happened last week. I have shared in other forums my experience and how the winter storm was and continues to be a humanitarian crisis. I think so many of us underestimated how many Austinites are medically vulnerable and on the verge of disaster. And we still have so many communities that are suffering without water and food. The Austin EMS Association has been gathering input from its members to learn about how emergency services can improve its response to future winter crises, which we know will be coming. For example, some stations lost power and were unable to charge life-saving equipment. We failed to maintain winter boxes or put chains on our ambulances. Even if the power doesn't shut down, we have a lot of work to do to make sure we are prepared for freezing weather. While we are gathering this information, I also wanted to take a minute to thank you for the investments that you've made so far this year. Due to investments in the Chief Medical Officer, Travis Baker, our physician's assistant, was able to go out and provide care directly at the bedside, including sutures, abscesses, taking care of those, ingrown toenails, and antibiotics, and making sure that ambulances wouldn't have to make that dangerous drive to the patient and then to the ER. Our communications hotline was able to navigate people who have dialysis, methadone, oxygen, and other critical needs once those resources were set up. Additional ambulances were in place to answer countless calls, and our new community health paramedics were able to help when integral care and EMCOT were out of commission during the first few days of the ice storm. I'm proud of all of our first responders last week and their creative thinking, and we look forward to working with City Council on making sure that emergency services is better able to prepare for future emergencies that we know are coming. Thank you.
Michael Conti.
My name is Mike Conti, a resident of District 9. We were lucky to keep both power and water last week, which meant we had the luxury of looking at Twitter to try to figure out what the hell the city was doing. On Tuesday night, I watched the city manager at a press conference with the mayor and other top officials assure residents that Austin Water was, quote, holding steady, and that if, quote, anything changes, we will inform the public as soon as possible. According to Austin Water's own overview, the reservoirs had already hemorrhaged about half of their capacity at that point. Communication and transparency from Spencer Cronk could have kept people from going thirsty and living in unsanitary conditions. Last week, I did not receive a single emergency alert text. My partner, whose name our utilities are in, didn't receive an alert for the citywide boil notice until 12 hours after it was issued. I heard Mr. Cronk direct residents to call 311 on numerous occasions without alerting them to the fact that 311 was completely overwhelmed by call volume and that folks should expect to reach a full voicemail box. These are just small pieces from the litany of failures at the top to communicate and respond, which left people fending for themselves. It is unconscionable to hear Mr. Cronk and Mayor Adler spend this meeting hiding behind the efforts of community groups that they left to figure so much out on their own, especially when there's no problem finding resources this week for camp sweeps those same organizations oppose. Mayor Pro Tem Harper Madison, Councilmember Kassar, others on the dais who have been doing the work, we see you and we're with you. Let's fix things. I know there's not many speakers today because we are all still in an emergency. Folks are traumatized, and the everyday people who have been left to hold our city together are busy struggling to do so. I hope that all of you will proceed with the same urgency. I yield my time.
Mayor Pro Tem, do you want to make a point?
Yes, please. Thank you to the speaker for your kindness. I would just like to take the opportunity to say there's not a member on this dais or a member of our staff that hasn't been keeping that same level of contribution to this effort. So while I can appreciate people singling out some of us, I love it. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me, because as soon as I'm able, I'm going to sleep hard. But the truth of the matter is we are all addressing the need as quickly as we can. But thank you to the speaker for the kindness, because it really is appreciated right now. Mayor, the other thing I wanted to say was I wonder if we can queue it up so that we can speak to that sweeps question. We're getting a lot of those questions about camp sweeps. The way it was clarified for me was something along the lines of it was resuming the Violet Bag Project, which is just picking up refuse and not sweeping camps. But even if we don't speak to it right this second, I think it might be helpful for some of our other callers to know whether or not we are doing quote unquote sweeps.
I think that's a good point, and I think there was I remember seeing a list of what the change rules were for the activity that have been even more discerning than what we have been doing before. But that's a good point, Manager. If we can make sure that that's part of the presentations or part of the answers. Good point. Anyone else signed up to speak?
Yes. Jordan Middlebrook.
Hello, are you all able to hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
All right, thank you for hearing my testimony today. My name is Jordan Middlebrooks. I am a recent member within District 3, and I am calling on you all to take some immediate relief to provide to your constituents within Austin, Texas. We have all lived through the disaster that just happened, and so I'm asking for direct, immediate relief by providing utility bills and rent cancellation, direct cash assistance of $2,000 a month or more must be provided, especially to those who provide mutual aid like myself and the organizations that I worked with. There must be specific support for our most marginalized community members, including those who were on the streets until the day of the storm. I'm also asking for your help to advocate and endorse a weatherized, public, well-regulated power system that we all know would have prevented this crisis. We can also use this to put Texans to work and stop the climate crisis, making us more resilient as we move forward. I'm asking for your help to get Biden to come and endorse green recovery within Texas, and using this moment to take urgent action on the climate crisis. We've seen this with Hurricane Harvey. We've seen this now, and we're going to keep seeing it moving forward. So I'm asking you to be accountable, to take action, and do what needs to be done to make us resilient and to make us combat climate crisis and ultimately reduce the number of climate refugees that we will be having in Texas. The last thing that I'm asking for your assistance with is to support the resignation of Governor Abbott and Senator Cruz, who neglected their duty as public servants in the midst of this humanitarian crisis. These people are unfit to serve. They do not represent the people. They put profit over people, and they need to step down immediately. I am asking for your help as the leaders within our communities to take these actions, and I look to hold you accountable to these asks. Thank you. I waive the rest of my time.
Zenobia Joseph.
Thank you, Mayor, Council members. I'm Zenobia Joseph. My comments today are specifically related to senior citizens as it relates to item 3. I just want you to recognize, as you're ratifying the disaster declaration, Mayor, that our senior citizens that live in the area of Palmer Lane had no access to transportation. So while I certainly understand, and I did listen to the transit meeting yesterday, there is not transportation throughout the city. And I would ask you to recognize that in this case, it was a dire need. And so when you're talking about providing water and essential services, our senior citizens did not have access to get the water. I personally went to Walnut Creek Metropolitan Park. It's 2 buses away, but it's not pedestrian friendly. I called 311, and I would ask you to recognize the need to update in real time those sites that actually run out of water so that transit-dependent riders as well as the population at large would know which sites to actually go to. I just want to call to your attention that I also looked at the ERCOT slides from yesterday, and there's actually information that shows that this warning was as far back as November 5th, 2020. And so I would just ask Austin Energy to be a little bit more explicit with the community. There was no rolling blackout. I understand that areas like Samsung, the electricity was turned off, but far north Austin, I can tell you that it was 3 nights without lights, no power, no phone, nothing. I would ask you to also recognize that while I appreciate Mikasa was open, they did not have D-cell batteries. So as you look at your after-action review, I would ask you to include batteries as an essential item to distribute to the community. I lastly want to say thank you to In Cahoots. It's an East Austin facility that opened up their doors for the community to take showers. Again, it took me to be proactive to write to the Capital Metro CEO on Friday to let him know that essential workers in Northeast and Northwest Austin needed the bus in order to get the free hot meals, needed the bus to get water, and also to go to In Cahoots if they wanted to take a shower. I bring that to your attention because the buses were not due to start running until this past Monday. And when I emailed him on Friday, he responded in about an hour, and the buses were then activated in the black neighborhoods in Northeast Austin, as well as the area from Dessau to Tech Ridge and Lakeline Station 2. The other thing I would call to your attention is item number 7 as it relates to Little Walnut Creek Library. I just want you to understand that these encampments need to be citywide. While you are looking at the homeless issue, I want you to recognize that before the pandemic, there was no wash station or porta potty. Now there is. So you have an encampment there. I'll send you some pictures, but the area needs to be cleaned up. More importantly, I just want Councilmember Cassar to recognize that Gus Garcia was actually on the list. Council has a memorandum from March 27, 2020 that listed some of the areas where the encampments and services would be provided. So there is
Speaker,
no
your
need
time
to
has
have
expired.
an encampment.
Mayor, that concludes all the speakers.
Okay. Colleagues, let's turn to the agenda in front of us. We'll work our way through the items in the order that they were presented. That has